In this video, we're going to go behind the scenes on the visual effects breakdown for Zack Snyder's The Army of the Dead. This is part 4 in the 5-part series. We're exploring the digital environments inside of Las Vegas. Throughout this video, we're going to go deep into deconstructing the visual effects process of the film from the unique perspective of a visual effects supervisor. We'll discuss the work involved, the techniques, the technology, the process, all the key sequences of the film, and how all of them were created. I'm Alan McKay. I'm a visual effects supervisor in Hollywood. I've been working in the industry for over 25 years for studios like Industrial Light and Magic and dozens of other leading visual effects studios. On projects like Game of Thrones, Transformers, Star Trek, Superman Returns, Avengers Endgame, and many others. My goal is to teach artists and creators the skills and the knowledge to build a successful career in the creative industry, as well as the business side of being an artist. This is a 5-part video series. Each day this week, I'll be reviewing a new sequence of the film, as well as a compilation of all the visual effects at the end of the week. The goal is simply to break down and explain the shots and the challenges for each of these sequences, and share my thoughts as a visual effects supervisor on how I would approach a lot of these shots. Typically, we're handed a script, and we've got to break down exactly what we need to do and allocate the right studios and the right people to each of these sequences. So this is an opportunity to be able to break down my thoughts on how I would approach a lot of these sequences, and also discuss a lot of what's involved in that creative process. By the way, if you're enjoying the series, all the content that I have on this channel I make for free. All I ask in return is if you could please subscribe to this channel and like this video. It won't mean much to you, but it'll mean the world to me. And you won't miss out on any of the upcoming material that I'll be putting out daily. Finally, if there's a particular movie that you want to see covered in the upcoming visual effects breakdowns, let me know. Leave a comment below, as well as any questions that you might have about anything that wasn't covered or discussed here. I'm happy to answer all of that as well. So, let's get started. Okay, so let's talk digital environments. I'm going to try to plow through this pretty quickly and keep this short, but this is the first time we really get to see the environment. And again, like, this is all entirely CG, so it's pretty crazy when you think about it. All of this, let's say from here is my guess, because they've intentionally made a bit of a visual cutoff to, you know, what's live action. So this is all live action, and then all of this guy up here, this is all computer generated. And it makes sense. Like, you can't shoot in Vegas. Then on top of that, this is all shot during quarantine, which adds another level of complexity to it, because you can only have a set amount of people together. The social distancing, everyone has to wear a mask unless you're on camera. Every shoot, every crew is different, but in general, sorry, I just dropped my pen. In general, that's the rules with this. Places like Florida were a lot more open up. I'm not sure what Georgia was like, but certain places were a lot easier to shoot in. But yeah, in general, like, all of this is a location set that's been built, and but then everything behind it is all digital, because obviously you can't shoot Vegas, and then getting all that and dirtying it up, you know, it adds another level of complexity. Like, are you going to do with matte paintings? If you do, then it's going to look kind of flat in 2D. Like 20 years ago, that's how you would do it. These days, it makes sense. Like, do 3D renders. They look really beautiful. But the amount of work to do something like this is just utterly insane. And I believe, I'd have to check the credits, but I believe DNEG did all the stuff. I mentioned this in the last video. Like, they have 8,000 employees, and they have a lot of people in India who typically, when they get their shots, whether it's LA, Vancouver, London, they're going to get the shots and distribute them amongst their team. Like, they've got a massive team, massive different departments globally. So you're going to look at a lot of asset creation all being done internally. I believe they have a sister company. I can't remember the name of it now, but they've created a sister company which does all the outsourcing, and that's still part of their umbrella, but they're just doing it under a different brand. I'm not sure whether, I doubt that's for taxes. I'd say it's probably more so that way they can allow other studios to hire them as well, to capitalize on that as well. But I'd imagine there'd be so much asset development here, because initially they did a photoreal Vegas, and then you're doing a deteriorated Vegas as well. So I imagine the process for doing this stuff is that initially, and we'll talk about the pre-process in a moment, but you would start out with the, we'll call this clean assets. So this would be the photoreal stuff, like you'd have the real building, everything would look accurate. And once that's all done, that's when you would create the, let's call it broken, but the deteriorated version, basically. And so you'd have two different sets of assets. So a lot of crazy stuff, and this is kind of why I think they hint pretty earlier on. Like they say something like, we don't want to risk it or whatever, but it's kind of like we don't want to overstay our welcome, essentially, by staying outdoors the whole time. So we better move indoors. But it's like, well, it's cheaper to shoot in a room than to have everything be 3D tracked and backgrounds replaced and matched. But this is just utterly epic. So again, foreground, you get the idea. All of this is props, like actual set pieces, and then everything behind it is 3D. The horse is real, you're just putting a lot of stuff on top of him. So that's completely computer generated, looks beautiful. It's even stuff like this, just, I've kind of been bagging on dust the whole time, but here, adding this dust flowing over the edges here, that sort of stuff like really helps just kind of feel like the environment's alive. Because otherwise it can look like a matte painting that's just got this stuff projected for parallax. But yeah, I mean, instead, this whole thing feels quite alive. So obviously shots like this, having a CG city means that you can have complete freedom with the type of angles you're doing. Otherwise, this would just be a giant spherical map, you know, and you might have like a 3D building in the foreground here, just so that way it's got some kind of interaction with the foreground for parallax as the camera's moving around. But instead, you've got a full 3D environment, which is really cool. So what I think is way more interesting to talk about is all the behind the scenes stuff, because I think I can then explain things a little bit better. I have a lot of experience with building reconstruction stuff as of recently. So this to me, like I have a LIDAR scanner. I've got a lot of film gear for doing all this stuff, and they're not cheap, but what you're doing here is first of all, this is a helicopter, obviously, and this is where they're going around shooting a lot of footage, getting a lot of reference. This here is a drone flight map, and what you're doing is you're mapping out the entire flight pattern. And this isn't for LIDAR, this is for photogrammetry. And so what they're doing is they've got this this drone, which is going along these red lines, and every single time it runs out of battery, it goes to a certain altitude, it flies back to its base, and then it goes down, lands, you replace the batteries, hit resume, goes back up, and goes back to where it was, and continues the flight path. And looking at something like this is probably hours to do. So I believe, because I did look through here, they had saw something. Anyway, I believe they're using a DJI Matrix 1000. It looks like. Again, I haven't gone through this stuff. I just threw it in my timeline to take a look. So I haven't really gone through it, but this is creating all the photogrammetry. Now, there's a reason why you're doing this. Let me switch to blue. What they're doing is they went through, they would have like, let's say if this was the street, you'd have like a 3-lane street in Vegas. During COVID, they actually managed to, you get permits for anywhere you're filming, but you can actually then go and pay to have, let's say, an area blocked down or locked down for you while you're shooting. In this case, they would have paid to say, hey, we want to have access to one of the streets for this amount of hours during these times on this day. And what they were doing is they would have a forklift type deal, like whatever it is, which could go up I think 3 different levels. And so they're going around with a LIDAR scanner, which LIDAR scanner will look like, looks like a toaster. It's kind of hard to draw. Basically, it's got this little spinny thing in the center that's firing out lasers and spinning, I don't know how many revolutions a minute. It's pretty insane. And it's firing out lasers everywhere. And based on where it hits, it's capturing essentially positional information. The good thing is that they're physically accurate within, like, let's say 5 millimeters. So what you're doing is you have the scanner firing out lasers everywhere. And then you go to another level. So let's say you go down and then go down again. And you're firing it out again. And each time, it's very subtle, but with a building, when it's at this level, it's going to be capturing all this information. But when you get to, let's say, to the bottom and do it again, it's going to be able to capture slight little subtle things that you probably wouldn't have captured at that angle before. So just having that slight, like 10 feet of, or 15 feet of height, you're able to get at least a little bit of a different angle with everything. And that's going to give you just more of what you're capturing. So the slight different height, it's just, all it's doing is it's filling in the areas that you probably wouldn't be able to see otherwise. So it's kind of interesting. Basically, you're doing one scan here, one scan here. You wouldn't need to do 3 scans or anything, so I'd imagine it's just one at the bottom and one as high up as you possibly can go. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because the thing is, like, if you were to scan the stuff, you're going to have the building front face, and you're going to have the ground, but you're not really going to have anything above. So there's going to be holes all around there. You're not going to see anything there. And the roads are going to be distorted because you're capturing from down here, which is not the best way to capture it all. So they're going to be all distorted as well. So what you end up doing is having this drone flying around doing this photogrammetry pass with a ultra high res camera. And what it's doing is it's going to capture the roads, it's going to capture the texture information, but it's also going to capture the roofs. And each time, let me change the color again, each time it's probably taking a photo every 10 feet, 20 feet or something. But each time it's doing that, it's getting a slightly different angle. And it's doing this from right up above. So the thing is, if you were just capturing the photogrammetry from above, first of all, photogrammetry isn't accurate. Photogrammetry, it's solving, same way camera tracking works as well, it's solving based on all the images it got. It says, I've got all these images, this is what I think this should look like. And it gives you back something and you're like, oh yeah, it looks like buildings. But it isn't to scale, and it isn't 100% accurate. LIDAR is. So if you're doing photogrammetry, it's going to capture the roofs really detailed, and even the stuff on top, because it's going to essentially be capturing from one side to the other. It's going to keep going around, so we get all the angles it needs for the top of the roof. But it's probably only going to get so much height accurately on the buildings. You know, as the camera gets to here, it's going to see some of the buildings from a different angle, so it's going to be able to see them better, but it's still not quite the same. But having that LIDAR on the street here firing up at it, it's going to give you all the other information to paint the whole picture. Now, I've been doing some tests recently, both with the, where's my iPhone? I got an iPhone, I got my Pixel, but I got a iPhone here. And what I was doing is testing the iPhone LiDAR, which is crap, but it's something, it's better than nothing. But I was testing that with photogrammetry. And then I was testing that against a $20,000 LiDAR scanner. And that was really interesting to compare the results, where if you're just doing LiDAR on a real industrial LiDAR scanner versus an iPhone, like the iPhone's terrible. It just looks like a bubbly piece of mess. But when you introduce photogrammetry into it, the photogrammetry is doing most of the work, but then it's using the iPhone to get some kind of accuracy. The iPhone can only see like 5 feet ahead of it. It's not really got that much range. Whereas the LiDAR scanner, I forget, it's pretty much a football field it can see. So it's crazy how far it can see, but the combination works really well. So that's what they're doing here. Basically, photogrammetry pass, and then they're doing LiDAR on the ground. So this also works as a texture reference as well, because then you're able to stitch all this together, project it onto the model, so you then have a diffuse pass as well. And there's some really cool tools out there that actually will clean up your textures to remove shadows, removes any blown out light. I kind of wonder with the photogrammetry though, I'd imagine that they were probably shooting at very specific times of the day, just to help with that, because harsh lighting is never good. You know, you can remove it somewhat, but it's still, like, especially in Vegas, be pretty intense. So this here, I believe, is the LiDAR version. Like, it's so blurry, like the resolution on this footage is not the best. So I can't really see, but I think this is all distorted, because that feels distorted. So I'd say this is all the LiDAR, which looks neat, but by itself, I don't think turned out amazing. This is the point cloud information, and this is typically what you want with LiDAR. You want the point cloud information rather than worrying about the meshing, because the meshing, I feel like, is not going to do a great job. So there's the giant point cloud, and then these are all the 3D assets that they've built. So you can see that Macbeth charts up here again that I mentioned before, the gray ball, your reflective ball. And so these are all the digital assets that have been built, and you can see they're all deteriorated, some aren't. So again, progression, you got one that is kind of before and after, and these are all turntables for all of them. So what this is what you call a contact sheet, and that's where you get all of this stuff, and you hit a button in Nuke, it'll generate a contact sheet, and that's a turntable of all this stuff from different angles, so that way you can review it in the theater room, and just kind of say, like, this looks great, or, you know, what the heck is this? So I would assume this is a proof of concept. I wish this was way higher resolution so I could see better, but I'd assume that this is just a proof of concept to kind of see, like, how it's all going. That's where you have, like, floating cars and everything else in there. And so this is what I was saying before, that you would typically do the photoreal current day Vegas, and then you would do the deteriorated version as well. And usually the production designer is the one who's working with the director and then directing the studio, saying, hey, I want it like this, I want it like that. And they'll be talking with the VFX soup, and the two of them communicate to the studio what they want. And the studio interprets that and tells their artists what to do. They do all the work, and, you know, eventually it goes back to them. So these are more turntables. I'd say it's just like the general layout, rather than it being like final assets or anything. And here you can see all the digital distributed assets. Like I said, the amount of detail is just utterly insane. So you can't really see it here, but this is what I was talking about, where you got the traffic light. You know, all this is in frame, and then all of this is added in. Kind of like a really crude reveal. I feel like one of the artists was told, like, hey, we need some cool visual breakdowns, so just have all the stuff, like all the props landing on the ground, and do some big reveal. The reason I mention that is because you can see that they've gone and created a bounding box, and they're just animating the bounding box as like a mesh cutting tool, like a poly chop in Houdini. So you can see it's kind of just like cutting faces randomly and revealing it all. And this stuff's lowering down onto the ground. So it's not the most elegant reveal I've ever seen, but hey, whatever. So this is what I was talking about earlier, where you've got this kind of forklift, like cherry picker, whatever it is, and they're just going around trying to capture as much stuff as they can. So I think they're doing texture reference as well, so they got cameras there. And then you got LiDARs here as well. And there's the spinny thing. this is all the point cloud information. There it is in action. Now, this is what I was talking about. This is just straight LiDAR, where then you're meshing it afterwards, and yeah, it's not going to look that pretty. But like I said, it's more about getting the point cloud information, which is really important, rather than worrying about this. It's pretty awesome though. Like, again, this is just the LiDAR, but it's kind of cool doing a little fly through. And then obviously once you get all the final assets, you can distribute crowds, everything through it. Looks beautiful. So I'm just going to play this clip. Like, this is a photoreal render of Vegas. It looks amazing. And then you can see the final production shot. So in general, like this sort of thing, I mean, it's a crap load of work. It's also a crap load of planning, because you need to get all of these assets. You need to create all the deterioration. You need to make sure you've captured everything you need. You need to make sure it's all accurate. There's so much to go into it. But once you have this, typically any of these shots, it's about, okay, we'll track the footage, you get everything measured, so then you're just putting in background replacements on everything. And as long as you have all the information captured from the shoot, then you can get realistic looking shots and everything integrated together. I think this stuff turned out great, and it's pretty impressive, because this, I feel like, the more that you can capture environments, especially with virtual production, the more that you can have so much more freedom to not rely on having to be in that specific location or a mimicked backlot of that location to get the shots you need all the time. So hopefully this sheds some light on a few things. Let me know if this is something you want to see more of, or you don't care about digital environments. I'm always curious to know. But yeah, hopefully you found this valuable. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll be back tomorrow with the next part in the series. Each week I plan to review a different film and share as many insights as I can with you. And if there's a particular movie that you want to see covered, leave a comment below and let me know. Or if there's any big questions not answered here in this video that you would like to see covered, let me know as well. I'm happy to hear from you. Creating these videos weekly is a lot of work, but I love sharing and I love helping other creators like yourself. All I ask is, if you want to support this channel as well as ensure that I can create more of these videos, please like and subscribe to my channel, as well as feel free to spread the word so that others can benefit from these videos as well. Like I said, it might not mean much to you, but it'll mean the world to me. And you won't miss out on any of the upcoming content that I put out daily. This has been an absolute pleasure. All of this content I make for free, so that way you can get a better understanding of the visual effects process and filmmaking as well. One last thing, I just recently put out a free course on how to raise your prices, as well as how to land your dream clients as an artist. I've been in the industry for over 25 years, both as an artist as well as a manager, hiring artists as well as managing them, and of course paying them as well. So I'm very familiar with this topic. For me, it's a pet peeve when people say that there's no money in art, there's no career as an artist, or art doesn't pay. I want to eliminate the starving artist mindset for good. That's why I've created this 8-hour free course on everything I know about pricing yourself as an artist, how to raise your prices, how to land your dream clients that are willing to pay you what you're worth. And at least for now, this course is completely free to download. So get the entire 8-hour free course at pricingclass.com, or click the link below in the description, so that way you can check it out there as well. And if you like this video, I've put another video somewhere up above me that I think you're also going to like as well. I've also put a link to the playlist for all the visual effects breakdowns that you can check out that I've created as well. I'm Alan McKay. Thanks for watching.